Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of History's Greatest Battles. As stated before, I am an ardent fan of history, but I'm not a credentialed military historian or a historical scholar. Though I do my absolute best, unfortunately, we will experience mispronunciations from time to time, which I apologize in advance for. If you can correct me, and I'm all ears all the time, historical truth is what I want. You can click the link at the bottom of the show notes, and you'll be able to send me a text message of your choosing. And so, we begin.
Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 20, The Battle of Bouvines, the 26th of July, 1214. French forces, 7,000 cavalry and roughly 15,000 infantry. Germanic forces, 6,000 cavalry and roughly 18,000 infantry. Philip's triumph at Bouvines laid the cornerstone of the French nation, transforming a patchwork of feudal territories into a unified kingdom under a powerful monarchy. In stark contrast, Otto's crushing defeat shattered the Holy Roman Empire's cohesion, plunging Germany into a quagmire of discord and internal strife that would fester for centuries. Meanwhile, King John of England, unable to rally support for his continental ambitions, found himself cornered and weakened at home, ultimately forced to accede to the Magna Carta, a momentous concession that curtailed his power and paved the way for constitutional governance.
The Battle of Bouvines is the climax of a labyrinthine saga, woven from the threads of religious zeal and the boundless ambitions of monarchs. At its heart are four titans of the medieval world: the embattled King John of England, the cunning Philip II of France, the imperious Holy Roman Emperor Otto IV, and the unyielding Pope Innocent III. Each of these rulers wielded power like a blade, carving out their visions of dominion across the landscape of Europe. By the end of the 12th century, the Holy Roman Empire, once the mighty heart of Central Europe, had fallen from grace of the papacy. Its emperor's authority, once unquestioned, now buckled under the relentless pressure of ambitious German princes, each one hungry for power and autonomy, threatening to splinter the empire into 1,000 shards. The Hohenstaufen dynasty still wore the imperial crown, yet the death of Frederick Barbarossa during the ill-fated Second Crusade had cast a long shadow. His successors, mere echoes of his once mighty presence, struggled to hold the empire together, their authority slipping away like sand through their fingers. Henry V, Barbarossa's son, had presided over a lackluster reign, and upon his death, the empire was plunged into chaos. A bitter succession crisis erupted in 1197, pitting the cunning Otto IV against a mere child, Henry VI, who was just 4 years old, a puppet caught in the crossfire of his father's ambitions and the ruthless power plays of the empire. Henry V had sealed his dynastic ambitions by marrying the daughter of the Norman King of Sicily, and thus Henry VI was born amidst the sun-drenched landscapes of the island of Sicily, far from the cold, fractious German heartlands that would one day demand his rule. When Henry V breathed his last, Pope Innocent III, the master strategist, seized upon the emperor's dying wishes, taking the young Henry VI under his wing. The Pope's intention was clear: to mold the boy into a tool of papal ambition, a living chess piece on the board of European power. Despite being raised under the loose watch of the papal court, with only a shadow of true support, Henry VI blossomed into a clever young man, his keen mind sharpened by the political intrigues swirling around him like a relentless storm. Pope Innocent III was no ordinary pontiff. His ambitions soared above those of his predecessors. He sought nothing less than the absolute supremacy of the papacy over all of Europe, wielding the threat of excommunication like a thunderbolt, ready to strike down not just disobedient kings, but entire nations that dared defy his will. With the cunning of a seasoned general, Innocent enlisted the Lombards, Europe's shrewdest bankers, to manage the church's vast wealth. Through their hands, he funneled taxes and tithes, amassing a fortune that made the papacy not only a spiritual force, but an economic titan as well. In 1209, Pope Innocent III threw his formidable weight behind Otto IV, proclaiming him as Holy Roman Emperor. Yet this papal endorsement could not silence all dissent, for the Germanic people were a fractious lot, and loyalty to Otto was far from universal. Otto found a staunch ally in King John of England, a ruler as embattled as he was ambitious. John, ever scheming to expand his influence in Western Europe, saw in Otto a valuable partner, a kindred spirit in a world of treachery and of power struggles. King John, the ill-favored son of Henry II and uncle to Otto, was a monarch whose name was more curse than crown. His incessant wars, most of them ill-fated, demanded ever higher taxes, and with each levy, his popularity among his subjects plummeted further into the abyss. From his father, John had inherited vast domains across the continent, lands won by both the political alliance of his father's marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine and the sharp edge of conquest. This so-called Angevin Empire stretched over much of what is now Western France, a prize both glittering and perilous. Known as the Angevin Empire, these territories covered much of present-day Western France, a patchwork of lands bound together by feudal ties and royal claims, yet perpetually threatened by internal discord and external enemies. John's, frankly, inept leadership and insufferable arrogance only served to alienate the English nobility further. His brazen attempt to install a crony as the Archbishop of Canterbury led to his excommunication, a blow that isolated him not only from the church, but also from the hearts of his religious people. Yet, excommunication did not quench John's thirst for power. Undeterred, he schemed to seize control of all of modern France, setting his sights on King Philip II of the House of Capet in Paris, whose own power was steadily on the rise. Philip's ascent to the throne came at a pivotal moment, a time ripe with opportunity for those bold enough to seize it. Philip's predecessors had skillfully managed control over the Ile-de-France, the heartland around Paris. Through shrewd marriages, feudal maneuvering, and the timely acquisition of lands left without male heirs, they expanded their influence, slowly but surely, building a stronghold for the Capetian dynasty. William of Normandy, the legendary conqueror of England in 1066, had been a vassal to the Capetian dynasty. By this ancient tie of fealty, both he and his descendants were theoretically beholden to the commands of the French crown, a bond that was more a source of contention than compliance in the centuries to follow. In 1199, these various narratives began to weave into a single fateful tapestry. With temporary favor from the Pope, John divorced Isabel of Gloucester and married the alluring Isabella of Angoulême, despite her being betrothed to the Count of Lusignan. This brazen act incensed the nobility on both sides of the channel, prompting the continental aristocracy to turn to Philip for justice. Philip, seizing this opportunity, summoned his supposed vassal, King John of England, to appear before him in Paris and account for his actions. John's response was defiance. He refused to obey, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. In retaliation, Philip embarked on a campaign of conquest. By 1204, he had wrested Normandy from English control and continued his advance, seizing Brittany, Anjou, Maine, Touraine, and Poitou over the next 2 years. He established a firm administrative grip on these territories and won over the local nobility, consolidating his power. These sweeping victories enraged King John, who saw his ancestral lands slipping away through his grasp. In 1212, Otto IV cast his gaze southward. Declaring war, on the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. His goals were twofold: to expand the dominion of the Holy Roman Empire and to neutralize his rival, Henry VI, who had grown into a sharp-minded and capable adversary. Otto's aggressive expansion threatened to encircle Rome with his Germanic might, prompting Pope Innocent to act decisively. He excommunicated Otto and crowned Henry as the new emperor. Philip, wary of Otto's ambitions spilling over into his own domains, aligned himself with the Pope's choice. Though Philip and Innocent had clashed in the past, the specter of Otto's power forged an uneasy alliance between them. Meanwhile, John, desperate to reclaim his lost continental territories and preserve the lucrative English wool trade with Flanders, forged an alliance with his nephew, Otto. Together, they plotted to counter Philip's burgeoning power. Yet John's plans met resistance at home. His discontented nobles balked at the idea of following an excommunicated king into battle against the Pope. Cornered, John sought reconciliation with Innocent, agreeing to place all of England under papal vassalage in a desperate bid to secure his throne. In the end, John proved to be a toothless threat, his grand ambitions fizzling out in the face of internal dissent and strategic missteps. John ventured into Aquitaine, only to find his pleas for support falling on deaf ears. Sensing an opportunity, Philip sent his son Louis to watch over Aquitaine while he prepared to face the real threat, Otto's coalition. The German emperor had joined forces with the counts of Flanders and Boulogne and the princes of the Netherlands, forming a formidable alliance. Philip saw this as his chance to seize control of Flanders and its lucrative wool trade, cutting John off from a vital economic lifeline. With steady resolve, Philip marched out to confront this formidable coalition, which boasted a force of 6,000 knights and 18,000 infantry. Truly a mighty host, bristling with steel and especially ambition. Philip's own army, numbering 7,000 knights and 15,000 infantry, advanced into Flanders, determined to meet the enemy on foreign soil and prevent an invasion of his own territories. It was on the plains between Lille and Tournai, between the bridge at Bouvines, that the two armies would finally meet, their destinies converging in a clash that would echo through the annals of political and military history. Sensing whispers of treachery within his own ranks, Philip called his nobles to a grand feast, invoking the image of the Last Supper. He gazed across the table, and with a voice edged in steel, asked if any among them would betray him. The nobles, rising as one, swore their loyalty to Philip. Quote, "We will have no other king but you," they declared. "Now ride boldly against your enemies, and we are prepared to die with you." End quote. For hours, the two armies stood poised, eyeing each other across the field. Then, sensing Otto's maneuver to cut off his line of retreat to Paris, Philip ordered a calculated withdrawal toward the bridge. Mistaking Philip's move for a retreat, Otto pressed his advantage, charging forward without waiting for the Flemish and German reinforcements. Unbeknownst to him, Philip's withdrawal was a masterful feint, drawing Otto's forces into the flat, open terrain where the French cavalry, superbly trained and disciplined, could strike with devastating effect. The battle erupted on July 27, 1214, with infantry from Soissons launching a surprise attack on the imperial right flank, manned by Flemish knights. Initially, the Flemish sneered at the prospect of fighting common foot soldiers, but a rallying cry of "Death to the French" spurred them into action. As the melee escalated, the French royal household cavalry charged in support of their infantry, plunging the battlefield into gory chaos. Philip himself was in the eye of the storm, leading the charge with his knights against the heart of the imperial lines. Amidst the furious clamor of battle, he faced peril at every turn, but his resolve held firm. Slowly, the imperial center began to crumble under the relentless pressure of the French assault. Otto, too, fought among his men, but as the tide turned against him, he chose to flee the field, even while the outcome still hung in the balance. His retreat sent shockwaves through his forces, causing them to falter and then to break. Only the imperial right held firm, if only for a fleeting moment. On the right flank, Count Renaud of Bourgogne commanded a resolute contingent of English soldiers. In a desperate bid to hold the line, he arranged his pikemen in two concentric circles, charging out with his knights, clashing with the enemy, then retreating back to the safety of the pikes. His defiant stand came to an end when he was unhorsed and captured outside the protective circle. The French emerged with relatively light losses, but the imperial forces were decimated. In an era where knightly combat often resembled a formal joust, more than a life and death struggle, Bouvines was a brutal exception. The carnage was severe. 170 knights lay dead, and 140 more were captured, alongside 1,000 infantrymen. Both Philip and Otto, leaders who led from the front and shared the same perils as their men, exemplified the valor and dangers inherent in medieval warfare. The defeat at Bouvines spelled the end of Otto's reign. He was deposed and replaced by Henry VI, the Pope's favored candidate. Yet this apparent victory for Innocent III was, in truth, hollow. Henry, Sicilian by birth and temperament, found the cold and austere climate of Germany distasteful. He spent a mere 4 years there before delegating power to local nobles and retreating to the warmth and the comfort of the Mediterranean. Henry's absence unleashed a tempest of rivalries among the German princes, ensuring that none could wield true authority. The empire fragmented into a patchwork of competing fiefdoms, each vying for supreme power. What might have been a united Germany had it been governed by a visionary leader instead splintered into a constellation of petty states. These divisions would persist, delaying German unification until the rise of Otto von Bismarck in the 19th century. The Holy Roman Empire lingered on as a political entity, but its authority was a mere shadow, its power largely illusory. The undisputed victor in this grand drama was Philip of France. Any whispers of dissent that may have plagued Philip before the battle were silenced in its aftermath. Philip's triumphant return to Paris ignited a week-long celebration, a jubilant display that solidified his legacy. His chaplain bestowed upon him the title of Augustus, a name that would echo throughout French history. With threats vanquished from both east and west, Philip expanded his dominion further, annexing Amiens, Douai, Lille, and Saint Quentin. His realm now stretched to the banks of the Rhine, a formidable bulwark against any future enemies. Combined with the territories previously wrested from John, the lands under Philip's direct control had tripled. Where once there had been a loose collection of provinces, there now stood a nation. Quote, "The triumph at Bouvines heralded the dawn of an era where men could, and indeed did, speak of the French as a single, united people." End quote. Philip's administration thrived under the guidance of local scholars and bureaucrats, bolstering the wealth and control of the crown. By appointing lawyers instead of clergy to key positions, he strengthened the judicial system, while his support for the merchant class spurred trade and economic growth. As the monarch's power surged, the influence of the nobility waned. Across the Channel, John's failure to reclaim his lost territories and his persistent conflicts with the English nobility produced quite the opposite effect. From Will Durant, quote, "The nobles chafed under John's relentless taxation to fund disastrous wars. His disregard for established laws, and his willingness to trade England's autonomy for papal favor. To press the battle further, John demanded a scutage, a monetary payment in place of military service," end quote. Since the days of Henry I, the English nobility had secured specific rights and privileges. Faced with John's incessant demands for more funds, they countered with their own ultimatum. In 1215, under pressure from his barons, John was compelled to sign the Magna Carta, a foundational document that would shape English law for centuries. From that moment on, the English monarchy would never wield absolute power again. The seeds of parliamentary rule, although they would take centuries to fully sprout, were planted on that historic day. The consequences of the Battle of Bouvines rippled across Europe. France solidified the foundations of an absolute monarchy that would endure until the upheavals of the French Revolution in 1789. England moved toward constitutional monarchy, curtailing the power of its kings. Meanwhile, Germany would languish in a state of disunity, without a cohesive nation or a strong central monarch for over 6 centuries.